one of those models that's a hot topic right now, I would say. I'm on LinkedIn and everybody's chiming in. It's a large language model that came out. And as soon as it came out, everybody jumped on it. And I want to show you why they jumped on it, right? And it leads us into a conversation. So let me share this with you folks. So what I've just added here on the screen is an article that is an AWS news blog that got released on January 30th. So just a couple of days ago, around you being able to go into a service called Amazon Bedrock. Amazon Bedrock allows you to have a playground of a bunch of different foundational models, and DeepSeek is now one of those models. Now, something happened with DeepSeek. It got a lot of attention. And of course, I'm not going to read this thing word for word, but I will scroll down here to highlight something I saw. And I was like, wow, this is pretty important here, right? This line reads, and maybe it's far away from you, but this line here, this hyperlink that takes you to another link really, talks about DeepSeek coming out, and the infrastructure that's used around DeepSeek makes it super affordable. So 90 to 95% cheaper than Anthropic Cloud, right? 90 to 95% cheaper than ChatGPT. So as an enterprise company, when I'm choosing a model, there's a couple of things I want to push and pull on. There's the capabilities of the models, then there's the challenges of the model, right? I want to look at things like, what are the outputs going to be when I start to get outputs from the model? Are they going to be very precise to whatever the input was? That's fine. If it is, and it's a large one, it probably is going to cost a lot. So cost is going to be something that you wrestle with, especially as an enterprise company. So I can see how everybody really wanted to jump on this thing. And after it came out, something else happened, right? And it was very interesting to see how many people had to wrestle with the fact that everything wasn't airtight about DeepSeek, right? And since everything wasn't airtight about DeepSeek, Amazon is going to, or AWS specifically, is going to come out with this article to let you know what, we've secured things on the AWS side. Right? So as you are putting your data into that model, or as your inputs are going into that model, you can leverage Bedrock Guardrails. And Coach just talked about Bedrock Guardrails, and there's going to be a link in the post associated with this video so you can get familiar with Bedrock Guardrails. If you're there in Bedrock and you're messing around with foundation models, you might start to use the API of Bedrock. You say, I can go ahead and incorporate this into my application. I might even start building out agents. And that's just a term to say that I might have different tasks that might have different models to associate with those tasks. Now I can say, hey, if there's an input into the model, let's put some guardrails, right? Let's make sure this thing isn't biased. Make sure racism isn't happening. Let's make sure sexism isn't going down with the inputs that are happening to the model. I love this, and I want you to read this article too, right? And Coach, I know you're big on security, so I know that this was like a highlight for you. What was your thoughts around the whole DeepSeek thing?
Yeah, so when it first hit the stands, I was like, oh, wow, okay, that's impressive. And then my stock portfolio took a hit, right? And then from there, the other thing is the guardrails. This is where I say how so much of this falls into what we do every day, right? The guardrails from a financial perspective from my stocks portfolio is where if my stocks hit a certain price, I'm jumping out of that stock, right? So that's a guardrail in one sector, okay? But what I love about Amazon Bedrock Guardrails specifically is, first of all, whenever I hear Bedrock, it takes me back to the Flintstones, right? So it's one of those things that from a child growing up watching these cartoons, right? I go back, my first thought is the Flintstones. But then where we think about the importance of security guardrails, the importance, you've used terms like bias, the importance of ensuring that whatever data is being provided as an input or just as we'll talk about different things like tokenization and different databases and things of that nature. But again, the core of it for me is about protecting the data. Safeguarding the data, understanding if we need to clean the data and what does this data represent? And is it a fair representation of everyone that is included, right? And some of that information can also be optimized in the sense you're hearing us use terms like large language models. And again, I call it like the big brain, if you want to think about it that way, okay? And breaking down some of the terminology is it's like learning another language, right? If
Oh,
you
yeah.
are, if you've grown up and your first language is English, now when you start to maybe learn French or Spanish or Chinese or Mandarin, right? It takes you a little bit of time to understand the dialect. It takes you a little bit of time to learn to roll your R's, right? So if
Mm.
anyone has ever taken another language in high school or elementary, my youngest son here is now learning Chinese and Spanish. My first language is actually Spanish. So my first thought in my mind is to pronounce certain words in Spanish before I do it in English. And so
Hmm.
again, one of those things where you think about what are these guardrails? Again, it's there to safeguard the data. It's there to safeguard the production. It's there to safeguard the output.
Hmm.
And as we're going through these weeks, we'll talk about things like model cards. We'll talk about how we can select these different models in Bedrock based upon things like cost optimization, things like how does it scale? How can we interpret what we're seeing? What's the
Hmm.
transparency of these
Yes.
models that we want to select as well?
Hmm.
So again, we're just having a conversation, right? We're
Oh,
not
yeah.
going to get too deep into the weeds, but we'll talk about how you can, if that's where you want to go, because a little bit of this is out of scope for the exam, because we want to
Hmm.
come back to helping you prepare for the exam, and we're going to provide you these additional resources.
Hmm.
But the beauty of how fast Amazon and AWS was able to move to add this new model into Bedrock, but also from there ensure that the appropriate guardrails are in play, right?
There
And
you
so
go.
that's the key here, is that we want to emphasize guardrails and the importance of security no matter where the technology takes us. And this is a disruptive technology, don't get me
Oh, yeah.
wrong,
Oh,
but
yeah.
wherever this technology takes us, it's always about being able to ride that wave. And
Hmm.
that's the important factor here, is that get ready, stay ready, so you don't have to get ready with this.
There you go. I love that, coach. I love that. Get some rules associated with what you're exposing to your models. And I think that's a great highlight for what we're doing here. You'll find DeepSeek R1 as a model in the marketplace, the Bedrock marketplace, to get started playing around with DeepSeek R1 if you choose to. But this is week one, folks, and it was so good having you. Real quick before we get out of here, eventually we'll start talking about the different services. And there was a service used to take this text to make it audible for you. And so we'll jump into maybe next week some of the names of the services like Amazon Poly here. And I see
Ah.
that's awesome that AWS is not only preaching that AI is available, right, in Bedrock, but actually put it into play right here. If I hit the play button right now, it's voiced by Amazon Poly. Coach, I didn't know you used to surf. That's cool.
Hey, I'm from San Diego, right? So
Yeah,
yeah,
that's pretty sweet.
yeah.
I got to learn a little bit. I got to learn a little bit of something like that. But no, folks, see you later. Catch y'all
All
next time.
right. Enjoy.